The city always looked different at night. The light from the tall buildings shimmered on the wet streets, and the sound of passing cars faded behind Ilara as she walked home. Her shoes clicked softly against the pavement. It was late, too late for anyone decent to be walking alone, but she didn't have a choice. Her shift at the hospital had ended hours ago, and she was exhausted. Her back ached, her hands smelled faintly of antiseptic, and her head throbbed from too much coffee and too little rest. The shortcut through Oak Ridge Alley was faster. Darker, too, but it saved her 15 minutes, and after 12 hours on her feet, 15 minutes mattered. She pulled her thin jacket tighter around her body and quickened her steps. Then she heard it. At first, it was just a muffled sound, a grunt, maybe, or a shoe scraping against brick. She slowed down, listening. The alley stretched long and narrow ahead of her, lined with dumpsters and cracked walls. The sound came again, clearer this time. A man's voice. Pain. Then another, deeper, crueler. Hold him down. Ilara froze. Her heart began to pound in her chest. She could see shadows moving under the dim yellow streetlight at the far end of the alley. 3 men, their faces hidden by hoodies, stood over someone crumpled on the ground. She took a step back. She should turn around, walk away, pretend she didn't see. That would be the smart thing. But then the man on the ground let out a sound, low, broken, like someone gasping for air. Ilara had heard that sound before, too many times at the hospital, in the ER, when someone was barely holding on. Her body moved before her brain could stop it. "Stop," she shouted. The word echoed off the brick walls, sharp and trembling. The men froze for half a second, then one turned toward her. "What did you say?" His voice was rough, almost amused. "Stop it. You'll kill him," she said, her voice shaking. The man laughed and took a step forward. "Lady, this isn't your problem." Her grocery bag slipped from her hand, cans rolling across the dirty concrete. Her throat tightened, but she didn't move. "It is if you keep hurting him." "Big mistake," another one muttered. The first man, tall, broad, with a scar cutting across his cheek, grinned as he walked closer. "You got guts, sweetheart. Shame that won't save you." Ilara's pulse roared in her ears. She glanced behind her, but the street was empty. No one would help. No one ever did in this part of the city. Still, something deep inside her refused to back down. Maybe it was stubbornness, or the years of watching people suffer while she stayed quiet. Tonight, she couldn't. "Leave him alone," she said again, though her voice was quieter now. The scarred man raised his hand, and for one terrifying second she thought he would hit her. But before he could move, another voice broke through the night. It was calm, cold, and it came from behind them. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." The sound froze everyone. Even the scarred man turned, his expression suddenly uncertain. Ilara followed his gaze and saw him. A tall man stood at the mouth of the alley, half in shadow, half in light. He didn't shout. He didn't move fast. But there was something about the way he stood, still, controlled, that made every muscle in her body tense. He wore a dark coat that looked too expensive for this part of town. His hair was slicked back, his face sharp, his eyes cold. The attackers exchanged uneasy looks. "Who the hell are you?" one of them demanded. The stranger took a slow step forward. "That's not important." His voice was deep, even, without emotion. "What matters is that you stop. Now." "Or what?" the scarred man barked. The stranger smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Or you'll find out why people in this city don't ask that question twice." Something in his tone made Ilara's skin prickle. The air felt heavier somehow, tighter. One of the attackers swung first, a mistake. The stranger moved faster than her eyes could follow. A single punch, clean and silent, sent the man sprawling. The others shouted and charged, but it was over in seconds. The man fought like he'd done it all his life, calm, efficient, no wasted motion. Ilara stood frozen, unable to look away. When the last attacker hit the ground groaning, the alley fell silent again. The stranger straightened his coat as if nothing had happened. Then he turned his head slowly toward her. Their eyes met. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. His eyes were a strange shade dark, almost black, but sharp, like glass catching light. He said quietly, "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. No. But that man," she pointed to the one lying motionless on the ground, the man who had been beaten before she arrived. The stranger walked over, crouched down, and checked the man's pulse. "He's alive," he said after a moment. His voice was softer now, though still distant. Ilara knelt beside him. "We should call the police." That earned a faint, humorless smile. "No. There are other ways to handle this." Before she could ask what that meant, he took out a phone, sleek, black, unfamiliar, and spoke rapidly in another language. Italian, she thought. A few minutes later, the sound of engines filled the alley. 2 black cars pulled up, silent and polished. Men in suits stepped out, their faces unreadable. They began collecting the unconscious attackers without a word. Ilara stared. Who are you?" The stranger looked at her for a long moment, then said simply, "Someone you shouldn't have met tonight." He glanced at her torn grocery bag and bent to pick it up. When he handed it back, his gloved fingers brushed hers. "You shouldn't walk here again. It's not safe." "I didn't mean to get involved," she said quickly. He was being hurt. I couldn't walk away." Something flickered in his eyes, respect, maybe, or surprise. Most people would have. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell faint cologne, dark and expensive. "You have strange courage, miss." "Ilara," she said softly. "Ilara," he repeated, testing the name as if it meant something. "You should go home now." One of the suited men opened the door to one of the cars. The stranger gestured toward it. "My driver will take you." "I can walk," she said, though her voice wavered. He tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "No, you can't. Not after what you've seen." For a moment, she thought about arguing. But his gaze, steady, cold, yet not cruel, made her stop. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once. "You'll be safe." She climbed into the car, the door closing softly behind her. Through the tinted window, she saw the stranger kneeling again beside the injured man, speaking quietly. Then the car began to move. As the city lights blurred past, Ilara realized her hands were trembling. She had no idea who that man was, but she knew one thing for certain. She would never forget his eyes. The next morning, Ilara woke up wondering if it had all been a dream. The details were too sharp to be dreams, though, the broken groceries, the faint bruise on her wrist, the echo of that voice in her head, "You shouldn't walk here again." She tried to shake it off as she got ready for work. The hospital was always busy, she could lose herself there. But she couldn't stop thinking about the man in the alley, the calm way he'd fought, the quiet authority in his voice, the way even the air seemed to shift when he spoke. By the time she reached the hospital, she had convinced herself it was over. He was gone, whoever he was. But when she returned home that night, a black car was parked across the street. Her stomach tightened. She pretended not to notice, hurried up the steps to her apartment, and unlocked her door. Inside, the air felt colder somehow. Still. Then she saw it on the small table by the door. A box. Plain, black, with a single silver ribbon. There was no note. Her fingers hesitated before lifting the lid. Inside lay a silver locket, delicate and beautiful. The kind of thing that didn't belong in her small, cluttered apartment. The front was engraved with one word, Salva. She didn't know Italian, but she thought it meant safe. Her heart thudded. She turned the locket over and saw something that made her freeze. A tiny photograph of her, standing in the alley last night. The light caught her face mid-shout, fear and defiance mixed in her eyes. She sat down hard on the edge of the bed. Her mind spun. Someone had taken that picture. A soft knock at the door made her jump. She turned slowly. "Who is it?" A man's voice answered, polite but firm. "A message from Mr. Vasari." Her breath caught. "Who?" "The gentleman from last night," the voice said. She hesitated before opening the door. A man in a dark suit stood there, his expression blank. He handed her a white envelope. "Mr. Vasari asked me to deliver this." She took it slowly. "Why?" The man's eyes flickered, but his tone stayed professional. He repays his debts. Before she could ask anything else, he turned and walked away, disappearing down the hall. Inside the envelope was a note handwritten in neat, bold script. You shouldn't have been there. But you were. People like you don't cross paths with people like me. Yet you did. You are safe now. D.V. Ilara read it 3 times. Safe. The same word that was engraved on the locket. Who was he? She wanted to believe he was just a rich man who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But no one who spoke Italian to men in black cars and cleaned up crime scenes like they were chores was just anything. Still, beneath the fear, a strange warmth bloomed in her chest. Gratitude, maybe. Or something harder to name. She wore the locket to work the next day, tucked under her uniform. She told herself it was just a thank you gift. But every time her fingers brushed the cool metal, she heard his voice again. That evening, as she left the hospital, the same black car waited by the curb. The driver got out and opened the door without a word. I don't need a ride, she said nervously. He inclined his head. Mr. Vasari insists. She almost refused. But then she remembered the dark alley, the sound of boots on pavement, the echo of her own trembling voice shouting stop. So she got in. The car was silent inside, the city lights flickering across the glass. Where are you taking me? She asked quietly. To him, the driver said. He wishes to thank you in person. Her pulse quickened. She turned to the window, her reflection pale in the glass. Somewhere deep down, she knew she should be afraid. But curiosity, sharp and reckless, beat louder than fear. Who was Dante Vasari, really? And why did he care so much about the woman who couldn't walk away? The car moved smoothly through the city, gliding past glowing streetlights and empty intersections. Ilara sat stiffly in the back seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She wanted to ask questions, but the driver's silence wrapped the car like glass, thick, unbreakable, final. After what felt like an eternity, they stopped in front of a tall iron gate. It opened slowly, revealing a long driveway lined with trimmed hedges and flickering lanterns. At the end stood a mansion that looked like it had been carved out of shadow itself, grand, cold, and perfect. The driver opened her door. Mr. Vasari is waiting. Ilara hesitated. Why me? I don't. Please, the man interrupted gently. He doesn't like being kept waiting. Her pulse jumped. She stepped out. Inside, the mansion was silent except for the faint ticking of a distant clock. The marble floor gleamed beneath a chandelier that looked too delicate to belong in a house this intimidating. A tall figure stood near the window, looking out at the night. She knew it was him before he even turned around. Miss Mendez, he said quietly, his voice smooth as silk but heavy with something that made her skin prickle. You came. I wasn't given much of a choice, she said, trying to sound calm. His lips curved slightly. No one ever is, with me. He turned fully now, and under the warm light she could finally see him properly. His face was too sharp to be handsome in a normal way, every feature cut with precision. His eyes, deep and unreadable, seemed to hold the whole room in place. I thought you should hear it from me, he continued. The man you saved is alive. Ilara exhaled in relief. He'll recover? Yes. Because you intervened when you shouldn't have. Her eyebrows knit together. I shouldn't have helped someone who was being beaten. He studied her, like a teacher watching a student answer a test. You shouldn't have risked yourself for a stranger. That alley wasn't meant for witnesses. The words chilled her. You make it sound like I interrupted something planned. He didn't deny it. Instead, he stepped closer, his shoes barely making a sound on the marble. You're very brave, he said softly. Or very foolish. I haven't decided which yet. Ilara swallowed hard. I didn't do it to be brave. I just couldn't walk away. He looked at her for a long time before speaking again. Most people walk away. You didn't. A long silence stretched between them. The air felt heavy, charged with something she couldn't name. Finally, he turned away and poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal carafe. Sit, he said, gesturing to the couch. She obeyed, because saying no felt impossible. He handed her a glass. Their fingers brushed again, a spark of warmth cutting through the cold space. I don't understand any of this, she admitted. The cars, the men, the gifts. Why me? Dante took a seat opposite her, his posture relaxed but his presence overwhelming. Because you stepped into my world without realizing it, he said simply. And once that happens, there's no going back. Her heart raced. Your world. He didn't answer directly. You saw something you weren't meant to see. That makes you vulnerable. So this is protection, she said slowly. He nodded once. Protection. Nothing more, nothing less. But I don't need. Yes, you do. His voice cut through hers, not loud, but final. If those men had known who they were attacking, you would not have walked away untouched. Ilara stared at him. Who were they attacking? He held her gaze for a beat too long. Someone close to me. Someone who made enemies. And you, she asked. Do you have enemies too? A faint smile ghosted across his lips. Everyone worth anything does. Ilara didn't know how to respond. She looked down at her hands, twisting the silver locket around her fingers. Did you send it? Yes. Why? To remind you that you are safe. For now. The words should have comforted her. Instead, they made her shiver. He leaned forward slightly. You work at St. Mary's Hospital, don't you? Her head snapped up. How do you? I make it my business to know things about the people I protect. That sounds more like control than protection, she said before she could stop herself. For a heartbeat, silence. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a low, quiet sound that wasn't cruel, just tired. You're not wrong. Ilara's throat went dry. Are you going to hurt me? No, he said, his expression softening, almost imperceptibly. But I can't promise the world won't try. He stood, his height and presence swallowing the room. You'll have a car waiting every evening. Use it. No arguments. She wanted to protest, to tell him she didn't want his help, but something in his tone made it clear that arguing would be useless. Why do you care? She whispered. You don't even know me. He paused in the doorway, looking back over his shoulder. Because you did something no one else ever does for me. What's that? You tried to save me. He left her sitting there, her thoughts tangled between fear and something dangerously close to curiosity. Outside, the night pressed against the windows, and for the first time, she realized the truth. Whatever world Dante Vasari lived in, it had already started pulling her inside. The following days passed in a blur. Every evening, the same sleek black car waited outside the hospital. Every night, Ilara told herself she wouldn't get in. And yet, somehow, she always did. Sometimes it drove her home. Sometimes, it took her somewhere else entirely, a quiet cafe after closing hours, a rooftop overlooking the city, a private library filled with books older than her grandparents. She never knew what to expect, only that Dante was always there, calm, watching, unshakably composed. At first, their conversations were short. How was your day? Long. Are you sleeping? Barely. But with each meeting, his questions became more personal, and his gaze lingered longer. One night, as they sat across from each other in the library, Ilara finally asked, "Why do you keep bringing me here?" He tilted his head slightly. "Would you rather I left you alone?" She hesitated. "That's not what I meant." He smiled faintly. "No one comes here unless I invite them. You should feel honored." "I don't," she said quietly. "I feel confused." He looked amused by her honesty. "Good. Confusion means you're still thinking. It means I haven't scared you away yet." "You did scare me," she admitted. "That first night. You still do." His smile faded. "Good. Fear keeps people alive." Ilara studied him, the way the lamplight softened his otherwise hard features. "Is that how you live? Always afraid?" He leaned back in his chair, considering. "Not afraid. Aware. The difference is survival." She looked down. "You talk like someone who's used to danger." He gave a soft, humorless laugh. "Danger doesn't surprise me anymore. Only kindness does." That quiet admission stayed with her. He stood then, moving to the window. The city lights painted him in gold and shadow. "You asked me once who I am, he said without turning. You deserve an answer. Ilara's breath caught. My name is Dante Vasari, he said. And in this city, that name means more than it should. She frowned. You own a company? He looked over his shoulder at her, his eyes dark. Something like that. I run things. Businesses. Deals. People. People? People who prefer power to rules, he said simply. The realization hit her slowly, like cold water down her spine. You mean? I mean, he interrupted softly, that most of what you've heard about me is true. Ilara stared. You're. He didn't let her finish. A criminal? A monster? Maybe. But never to those who don't deserve it. For a long moment, the only sound was the city outside, the hum of cars, the distant siren. I didn't want you to find out like this, he added quietly. But you deserved the truth. She rose to her feet. You saved me. I thought that I was a good man, he said, his voice low. Good and bad are just different masks people wear when it suits them. I don't have the luxury of pretending. Her throat tightened. So what does that make me, then? If I keep coming here? He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint scar along his jaw, the darkness in his eyes that didn't scare her as much as it should have. It makes you someone I trust. And I don't trust easily. She shook her head. You barely know me. I know enough, he said softly. You saw 3 men attacking someone and you stepped in. You could have died, but you didn't walk away. That tells me everything I need to know. Ilara's chest ached. You think I'm brave. But maybe I was just stupid. His hand brushed hers lightly, almost without thought. Sometimes bravery and stupidity are the same thing. I've built an empire on that truth. His touch lingered, warm and sure. For a heartbeat, she didn't pull away. Then she did, stepping back, her pulse racing. I can't be part of this. Whatever this is. He nodded once, though his expression didn't change. You already are. The words hung between them, heavy and true. Ilara turned away, trying to steady her breathing. I didn't ask for any of this. No, he said softly. You asked for safety. I'm giving it to you. She looked at him then, really looked at the man whose calm could turn violent in an instant, whose coldness hid something wounded beneath. And for the first time, she realized that maybe safety wasn't what she truly wanted. Maybe she wanted to understand why a man like Dante Vasari, with all his darkness and power, had chosen to protect a nobody like her. He seemed to read her thoughts. You think too much, he murmured, his voice almost tender. Not every story has a reason that makes sense. He reached into his pocket and pulled out another small envelope. A new address. Somewhere no one will bother you. I'll have someone move your things. Ilara stared at the paper in disbelief. You can't just. I can, he said simply. And I will. You may hate it now, but one day you'll understand. Her heart pounded. Understand what? He stepped closer again, his presence filling the space between them. That protection always has a price. Their eyes met, and in that moment, she understood that her life, the simple, quiet one she'd fought so hard to hold together, was gone. What replaced it was something far more dangerous. And as he reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, she couldn't tell whether she felt fear or something dangerously close to fascination. Go home, Ilara, he said softly. Sleep. Tomorrow will come faster than you think. She didn't ask what he meant. Because deep down, she already knew her tomorrow would never look the same again. The morning sun spilled weak light across Ilara's apartment, but the warmth did nothing to ease the tightness in her chest. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, Dante Vasari, his unreadable eyes, his calm voice, the quiet danger that clung to every word. She told herself she wouldn't see him again. She told herself that what happened in that marble mansion was a one-time thing. But the world had other plans. It started small. Her broken heater, which hadn't worked all winter, hummed back to life. Her refrigerator, dead for months, was suddenly replaced by a brand new one, stainless steel and gleaming. When she checked her mail, the stack of overdue bills that had haunted her for weeks was gone. She didn't imagine it. Someone had been here. Someone had touched her life without asking. At first, she tried to convince herself it was some act of kindness, a miracle even, but miracles didn't come with black cars waiting outside every night. That evening, when she left the hospital, the same car was there. The driver stepped out immediately, his dark suit perfectly pressed. "Miss Mendez," he said, holding the door open. "Mr. Vasari requests your company." Ilara stopped on the sidewalk, her stomach twisting. "I told him I don't need his help." The man didn't move. "He disagrees." Her fingers tightened around her bag. For a long moment, she just stood there, watching the lights flicker on the other side of the street. Then, quietly, she said, "Where?" The driver opened the door wider. "He'll explain." The car took her somewhere unfamiliar, not the mansion, but an upscale restaurant closed for the night. Inside, the scent of polished wood and wine lingered in the air. Candles flickered across the tables, though only one was set for two. And there he was, sitting at that table, waiting. Dante stood as she entered, wearing another perfectly tailored suit. "You came," he said simply. "I didn't have much of a choice," she said, keeping her voice even. He smiled faintly, as if her defiance amused him. "There's always a choice, Ilara. Some just come with higher consequences." She crossed her arms. "Why are you doing this? Fixing things in my apartment, paying my bills? I didn't ask for it." "No," he said, "you didn't. That's why it matters." Her brow furrowed. "That doesn't make sense." He gestured for her to sit. When she hesitated, he added, "You helped me when you didn't have to. You risked your life for someone you didn't know. People don't do that without wanting something in return. What you wanted was simple, to do what's right. I respect that." Ilara sat slowly. "You don't know me. I know enough." Their eyes met. There was no arrogance in his voice now, only certainty. She looked away. "You don't owe me anything, Dante." He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. "That's where you're wrong. I owe you more than you understand." There was something in his tone that made her pause, a weight, a truth hidden behind his calm. "Who was he?" she asked quietly. "The man in the alley. The one they were hurting." He studied her for a long time before answering. "My brother." Her heart skipped. "Your brother?" He nodded. "Luca. He's still alive, thanks to you." She blinked, trying to process that. "So you were there that night because of him?" "Yes. But not soon enough." His jaw tightened. "If you hadn't intervened, he'd be dead." Ilara exhaled slowly. "Then you should be helping him, not me." "I already am," he said softly. "You're part of that now." She frowned. "Part of what?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he poured her a glass of water, his movements calm, precise. "Do you believe in debts, Ilara? Real ones, not the kind money can erase." "I believe in gratitude," she said. "But not in ownership." That made him smile again, faint and distant. "You think I'm trying to own you? I don't know what you're trying to do." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm keeping you safe. That's all." "Safe from what?" Dante's expression hardened. "The kind of men who don't like loose ends." She froze. "Loose ends? You saw something you shouldn't have," he said quietly. "That means your name has been spoken by people I'd rather you never meet." Her throat tightened. "You're saying someone might come after me?" "I'm saying someone already tried." Her heart pounded. "What do you mean?" He slid something across the table, a small envelope. Inside was a photo of her apartment door, taken from across the street. Another of her leaving the hospital. Her hands trembled. "Who took these?" "Someone who won't be taking any more." Ilara looked up sharply. "What did you do?" "What I always do," he said quietly. "I handled it." For a long moment, she said nothing. The candlelight flickered between them, the silence growing heavier. Finally, she whispered, "You scare me, Dante." He didn't flinch. "Good. Fear keeps you alert. But you're safe now. That's what matters." He stood, smoothing his jacket. "From now on, you'll have security nearby. Discreet, but close. Don't argue." She rose too, her voice shaking. You can't just take over my life. I already have, he said, almost gently. And if it keeps you alive, I'll do worse. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. You saved my blood, Ilara. That makes you family in a way. And I protect my family. She met his gaze, torn between anger and confusion. I didn't ask for this. I know. He looked at her as if that made all the difference. That's why you got it. And just like that, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone under the soft glow of the candles, shaken, angry, and more entangled than ever before. That night, Ilara dreamt of rain and footsteps, of shadows that whispered her name. When she woke, the locket around her neck felt heavier, as though it carried the weight of what she now knew. She tried to focus on work, but the hospital felt strange. People looked at her differently, as if they knew something she didn't. A few nurses whispered when she walked past. One of the interns even asked, "Are you really with him?" "With who?" she asked sharply. The intern shrugged nervously. "Just, people talk. They say someone powerful's been sending cars for you. That is dangerous." Ilara didn't answer. But inside, her stomach twisted. By the time her shift ended, she was ready to go home, lock the door, and forget. But the moment she stepped outside, she saw a familiar black car waiting. The driver nodded to her. "Miss Mendez. Mr. Vasari asked me to deliver something." He handed her a small velvet box. She frowned. "What is this?" "He said you'd understand." Before she could say anything, the car drove off, disappearing into the night traffic. She opened the box right there under the streetlight. Inside was a pair of silver earrings, small, elegant, shaped like wings. And beneath them, a note in the same handwriting as before. "For the little bird who flew into the storm. Don't look back." Her throat tightened. Little bird. It was what he had called her once, quietly, after she'd told him she hated feeling powerless. She hadn't thought he remembered. But this was too much. She snapped the box shut and shoved it into her bag, her pulse racing. When she got home, she found her apartment door already unlocked. Her heart stopped. She froze, listening. Then she heard a voice from the living room, calm, low, familiar. "You should change the locks," Dante said. "The old ones are useless." Ilara turned the corner to see him sitting on her couch like he owned the place, his jacket off, his shirt sleeves rolled up. Her shock quickly turned to anger. "How did you get in here?" He didn't look up from the folder in his hands. The door was open. No, it wasn't. He met her eyes, unbothered. "It was. Now it isn't. I had it fixed." She stared at him, her hands curling into fists. "You can't just walk into my home." "Your home wasn't safe," he said simply. "Now it is. That doesn't give you the right." "Ilara." His voice stopped her mid-sentence. Calm, deep, commanding. "You're alive because I decide who gets close to you. That's not arrogance. It's math. Every person who steps into your life now has to go through me first." She stared at him, torn between fury and disbelief. "You think you can control me?" "I don't have to," he said quietly. "You're here. You could have run, but you didn't." Her breath caught. "That doesn't mean I want this." "No," he said, standing, closing the folder. "It means you understand it." He walked toward her, every step deliberate. "The men who attacked my brother worked for someone else. Someone who doesn't stop until every witness is gone. That includes you." Her heartbeat thundered. "So this is about keeping me quiet. This is about keeping you breathing," he said firmly. He stopped inches away from her. "Look at me, Ilara." She hesitated, then met his gaze. "Do you really think I'd let anyone touch you now?" he asked, voice low. "After what you did? After what you saw?" Something in his tone made her chest tighten, not fear this time, but something deeper. He reached into his pocket and pulled out another envelope, smaller than the others. "Inside, you'll find a key. It's for a new apartment. Safer. Better." She shook her head. "You don't get to decide where I live." "I already did," he said simply. "You can keep fighting me, or you can accept that you're under my protection. Either way, the result will be the same." She glared at him. You think I'll just obey you because you're dangerous? He smiled faintly. No. I think you'll listen because you're smart. She wanted to scream, to tell him he was wrong, but deep down, she knew she couldn't walk away. Not when the shadows in her life had already multiplied. He stepped back, his tone softening. You've lost enough in your life, haven't you? Let me carry some of that weight. Her voice broke. Why are you doing this? He paused, his expression unreadable. Because you remind me of someone I couldn't save. And with that, he left, the scent of his cologne lingering in the air, the silence of her small apartment suddenly deafening. Ilara sank onto the couch, staring at the key in her hand, the words of his note echoing in her mind. Little bird. Don't look back. She didn't know if she was being saved or caged. But for the first time, she realized maybe there was no difference anymore. The hospital was supposed to be her refuge, a place where everything made sense, where she could lose herself in the rhythm of patients, alarms, and fluorescent lights. But lately, even that felt poisoned. It started with whispers. When Ilara entered the break room, the conversation always stopped. When she walked down the hall, she could feel eyes follow her. Did you hear? One nurse murmured when she thought Ilara wasn't listening. She's with someone powerful. That's how she paid off her bills. Another laughed softly. Powerful or dangerous? Because I've seen that car pick her up every night. The driver doesn't even blink. Creepy. Ilara didn't respond. She just pushed through the doors and focused on her work, forcing her heartbeat to slow. But the rumors clung to her like smoke. She had no way to explain what was happening. How could she tell them that the man in the car wasn't a boyfriend, but a storm that had swallowed her life? Dante's world had seeped into hers, no matter how hard she tried to resist it. She found men in suits standing near the hospital entrance, pretending to be waiting for someone. She noticed black cars idling in places they didn't belong. And once, she caught a glimpse of a man's reflection in the window watching her, then vanishing into the crowd. When she called Dante to confront him, he didn't answer. So she left him a message: "Stop sending people to follow me. I don't need protection." He replied an hour later with a single text. "They're not mine." The words made her stomach drop. If they weren't his, then whose were they? That night, she sat by her window with the lights off, watching the street below. At first, nothing. Then she saw it, a figure standing by the lamppost, unmoving, hands in his pockets. The kind of stillness that didn't belong to a casual passerby. Her phone buzzed again. "Close the curtains, Ilara." She froze, her eyes scanning the shadows. She hadn't even texted him. How did he know she was standing there? Her hands shook as she pulled the curtains closed. Moments later, another message. "You're not safe there tonight. Pack a bag." She hesitated. "I'm not leaving my apartment," she typed back. "I'm tired of running from your paranoia." There was a pause. Then, "It's not paranoia if someone's waiting to hurt you." She didn't move. Maybe he was exaggerating. Maybe he was trying to scare her into obedience again. Then came the knock. 3 sharp, deliberate knocks at her door. Her entire body went cold. "Ilara?" A voice, soft, unfamiliar, male. "Are you home?" She didn't answer. She grabbed her phone and whispered, "Someone's at my door." The reply came instantly. "Don't open it. I'm coming." Her pulse raced. "You can't," she started to text, but stopped when the door handle rattled. Whoever was outside wasn't waiting for permission anymore. She backed away, heart hammering. "Go away," she shouted. No answer. Only silence. Then, the distant growl of an engine, deep, powerful, approaching fast. Tires screeched against the asphalt. She heard voices, a struggle, then the dull thud of something heavy hitting the wall outside. Her breath caught as the door suddenly opened, not broken, just unlocked by someone who clearly knew how. Dante stood there, flanked by 2 men in dark suits. His expression was colder than she'd ever seen it. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. She shook her head, still trembling. "No, I." He didn't wait for her to finish. "Take her things," he ordered his men. "We're leaving." "What?" she cried. "You can't just." His eyes snapped to hers, hard as stone. Someone was waiting outside your building. If I'd been 2 minutes later, you'd be gone. Her words died on her tongue. Gone. They weren't here to talk, he said flatly. She swallowed hard, fear spreading through her chest like ice. Who were they? I'll find out, he said, already leading her out of the apartment. As they reached the street, she saw it, a black van, doors open, one man unconscious beside it, another being dragged away by Dante's men. The quiet hum of danger filled the air like static. Dante turned to her, his hand resting briefly on her arm. You're coming with me. No more arguments. She wanted to protest, but when she looked up into his eyes, she saw no room for negotiation. Only a fierce, controlled kind of fear, not for himself, but for her. She nodded slowly. He led her to his car, his touch firm but not harsh. As the doors closed and the city fell away behind them, Ilara pressed her palms against her knees, trying to stop them from shaking. Dante didn't speak for a long time. Finally, in the dark hum of the moving car, he said quietly, "You see now why I don't give people choices." She turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. "They were really here for me." "Yes," he said. "And that's just the beginning." Dante's mansion felt different this time. The first time she'd been here, the marble and gold had felt distant, cold. Now it felt like a fortress. Guards lined the hallways, their movements sharp and disciplined. Ilara followed Dante inside, her heart still racing. He stopped at the base of the grand staircase, turned to face her, and said, "You'll stay here until I say otherwise." "I can't," she said quickly. "I have work. My patients. They'll manage without you." She took a step forward, anger flaring. "You can't decide that for me." His voice dropped low, quiet but commanding. "Ilara. Someone tried to take you. Do you understand what that means? They know your face, your name, where you sleep. If I let you go back, you'll be dead before the week ends." The raw intensity in his tone made her freeze. He sighed, his shoulders softening slightly. "Please. Just stay. For now." It was the first time she had heard him sound almost human, not as the untouchable Dante Vasari, but as a man trying, in his own broken way, to protect something fragile. Ilara looked away. "Fine. For now." "Good," he said. "I'll have someone show you to your room." As he turned to leave, she asked quietly, "Do you ever get tired of being in control?" He paused mid-step. "Every day," he said, then walked away. Later, when she was alone in her room, Ilara tried to make sense of it all. The place was enormous, every detail perfect, yet it felt like a cage. The city she knew, her world of small apartments and worn shoes, had vanished. On the bedside table sat a new phone, sleek and untouched. A note lay beside it, "For your safety. Keep this with you at all times." She sighed and lay back on the bed, closing her eyes. She didn't know how long she stayed like that before the knock came. When she opened the door, a woman stood there, tall, elegant, wearing a black dress that looked far too formal for the hour. "Miss Mendez," the woman said smoothly. "Mr. Vasari asked me to deliver this." She handed over a silver envelope embossed with a faint crest, a phoenix rising from flames. Ilara frowned. "What is it?" "An invitation," the woman said, her tone polite but distant. "Tomorrow night. Formal attire." Before Ilara could ask more, the woman turned and left, her heels clicking softly against the marble. Ilara tore open the envelope. Inside was a card written in neat, dark ink. Vasari Foundation Annual Gala. For the benefit of the St. Lucia Children's Hospital. Attendance required. At the bottom, a handwritten note in Dante's script, "You'll be safe there. And I want the world to see who you are." She read it twice, her confusion deepening. Attendance required. It wasn't a request. The next evening, a garment bag appeared outside her door. Inside was a dress, midnight blue silk, shimmering faintly under the light. Beside it, a small box containing silver heels and a note, "Wear this." When she arrived downstairs, Dante was waiting near the entrance. He looked impossibly refined, a black tuxedo, crisp lines, every detail precise. His gaze swept over her, slow and deliberate. For once, she couldn't read his expression. "You look," he He paused, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. Perfect. Ilara flushed slightly. You planned this, didn't you? Of course, he said simply. I plan everything. She gave him a look, half amused, half annoyed. That must be exhausting. He smiled faintly. Only when things don't go my way. They drove in silence to the event, a massive hall glittering with chandeliers and expensive laughter. When Dante stepped out of the car, cameras flashed immediately. People called his name. The crowd parted for him like the sea. Ilara hesitated, overwhelmed, until he turned and offered his hand. Stay close, he murmured. This world bites. She placed her hand in his. The moment their fingers touched, the noise around them seemed to fade. Inside, the gala was dazzling. Gold and crystal everywhere, laughter rising like champagne bubbles. But every time Ilara tried to blend into the background, someone stared. Whispers rippled through the room. Who's she? With him? Impossible. Dante never brings anyone. Dante ignored them all. His hand stayed lightly at her back, steady, protective. Why are we here? She whispered. He leaned closer. Because people in my world like to play games. Tonight, I want them to see I've changed the rules. What rules? The ones where they think they can touch what's mine. Ilara froze, her heart racing. Yours? He smiled slightly, but his eyes stayed cold. Relax. It's just a word. For now. For now. Later, when the music softened and the crowd began to drift toward the dance floor, Dante led her to a quieter corner, a balcony overlooking the glowing city below. The wind tugged gently at her hair. She finally exhaled. This doesn't feel real. It isn't, he said softly. This world never is. She turned to him. Then why stay in it? He looked out at the city lights. Because someone has to control the chaos. Better me than men who'd burn it all. There was no pride in his voice, only weariness. Do you ever wish you could just walk away? She asked. He glanced at her, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Not until recently. Their eyes met, the city glowing beneath them. Ilara opened her mouth to say something, she didn't know what, but Dante's phone buzzed sharply in his pocket. His jaw tightened as he read the message. Is something wrong? She asked. He looked at her for a moment, then said quietly, It seems someone else knows you're here. Her stomach turned. What does that mean? It means, he said, slipping the phone away, the night isn't over yet. The ballroom glittered like a dream Ilara didn't belong in. Every chandelier dripped gold. Every guest gleamed with confidence born from wealth and power. But she stood there, fingers nervously tracing the cool silver of her locket, feeling like an imposter in silk. Dante stood beside her, the very definition of command. Wherever he went, the crowd seemed to bend, faces turning, voices dropping. His name rippled through the air like electricity. Ilara. His voice cut through her daze. Breathe. I am breathing, she said softly, trying to smile. He leaned slightly closer. No, you're holding your breath. She exhaled, the smallest laugh slipping out. You're observant. I have to be, he said. I watch for things that don't belong. Like you, for instance. Her eyebrows lifted. Thanks. His lips curved. It's a compliment. You don't fit into this place, and that's exactly why they can't stop staring. He was right. Eyes followed her everywhere, curiosity, envy, and disapproval mingling into one suffocating gaze. She heard snippets of conversation as they passed. Who is she? No one knows her. He never brings anyone. Ever. Ilara lowered her gaze. I think they're all waiting for me to make a mistake. Then give them nothing, Dante murmured, his tone steady. Stand tall. Let them wonder who could make me walk into a room and forget every deal, every enemy, every rule. Her chest tightened. You talk like I'm a statement, not a person. You're both, he said. Tonight, you're the statement that I'm untouchable. Before she could respond, a waiter approached with champagne. Dante took 2 glasses, handed one to her, and touched his to hers in a quiet toast. To survival, he said. She met his gaze. To control? He gave a faint smirk. Same thing, in my world. The night stretched on in a haze of faces and voices. Ilara tried to stay close to him, but the crowd shifted constantly, pulling them apart. When she found herself momentarily alone by the edge of the dance floor, she felt exposed. "Miss Mendez, isn't it?" The voice came from behind her, smooth, cultured, but with an edge she didn't like. She turned to find a man in his 50s, grey-haired and smiling too easily. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" "Not yet," he said, extending his hand. "Marco De Luca. Old friend of Dante's. You've caused quite the stir tonight." Ilara hesitated before shaking his hand. "I didn't mean to." He chuckled. "That's what makes it so interesting. Dante never brings anyone to these events. You must be special." Her stomach twisted. "I'm just." "Don't be modest," he said smoothly. "He's never been the sentimental type. If he's keeping you close, it's for a reason." She pulled her hand back. "Maybe because I helped someone who needed it." De Luca's smile faltered. "Ah. You mean his brother?" Ilara froze. "You know about that?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Everyone knows. But here's the secret, dear. Dante didn't tell anyone how you fit into the story. That means either you're very valuable, or very temporary." The words hit harder than she expected. "Excuse me," she said tightly, stepping away. But De Luca caught her wrist, not roughly, but firmly. "Be careful, Miss Mendez. Dante's world isn't built for kind hearts." "Let go," she said, her voice trembling. "Or what?" Before she could answer, the man's grip suddenly vanished, ripped away by Dante's hand. "Or you deal with me," Dante said, his tone low and dangerous. De Luca's smile returned, brittle now. "It was only a conversation." "Conversations don't leave bruises," Dante replied. He didn't raise his voice, but the shift in the room was immediate. Silence rippled outward. A few people turned to look, curiosity gleaming. De Luca's confidence cracked. He stepped back, muttering something about misunderstandings before melting into the crowd. Dante's hand stayed on Ilara's arm a second too long. "Did he touch you?" "I'm fine," she said quickly, though her pulse was racing. He scanned her wrist, his jaw tightening. "He won't be." "Dante." He turned away, already signaling to one of his men across the room. The silent exchange was brief, deadly. "Stop," Ilara said, stepping in front of him. "Don't do anything." "He grabbed you." "I said I'm fine," she snapped. "You can't solve everything by making people disappear." His eyes darkened. "You think I make them disappear?" "I don't know," she said. "And I don't want to know." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, with visible effort, he unclenched his fists. "Come with me," he said quietly. He led her out to the balcony, away from the crowd and the stifling air of wealth and secrets. The city stretched beneath them, lights scattered like fallen stars. Ilara gripped the railing, her breathing still uneven. "Do you always have to be the most dangerous person in every room?" He stood beside her, his voice softer now. "No. But I usually am." "Do you even hear yourself?" she said. "You talk like someone who's already given up on being human." "Maybe I did," he murmured. "A long time ago." She turned toward him. "Then why me? Why bring me here?" He looked at her, then really looked, as if he were trying to remember something long forgotten. "Because you remind me of the part of myself I lost." Ilara's voice wavered. "And what happens when I remind you too much?" "Then I protect you harder," he said simply. "Even if it means protecting you from me." Before she could reply, the ballroom doors burst open. One of Dante's men appeared, pale and breathless. "Sir," he said quickly, "we have a problem. It's Luca." The world seemed to tilt. They reached the hospital within minutes, Dante's car cutting through traffic like a blade. Ilara barely kept up as he strode down the corridor, his expression carved from stone. Nurses and guards stepped aside instinctively. "Where is he?" Dante demanded. "In his room," said one of the men. "But, sir, you should see this." The door opened, revealing chaos. 2 security guards were on the floor, unconscious. Luca lay in bed, hooked to machines, his skin pale. Someone had been here, and not just to visit. Dante's eyes swept the room. They tried to finish what they started. Ilara's breath caught. Is he? He's alive, Dante said, checking the monitors. His voice was calm, but his hands were shaking slightly. Barely. A doctor rushed in, startled to see them. You can't be in here. Dante's tone was sharp, controlled. You're going to keep him alive. Whatever it takes. The doctor hesitated, glancing at Ilara as if for help. Please, she said softly. He's his brother. That was enough. The doctor nodded and hurried to adjust the machines. When they were alone again, Dante turned to the window, staring out at the dark city. They got in through the back in trance, he muttered. Someone inside helped them. Ilara took a cautious step closer. You think someone in the hospital betrayed you? I don't think, he said coldly. I know. She hesitated. Then let the police handle it. He gave a bitter laugh. The police? Half of them work for my enemies. The other half owe me favors. She wanted to argue, but there was no use. This was his world, one where law meant nothing, and power meant survival. He faced her again, eyes hard. You need to understand something, Ilara. When you stepped into that alley, you didn't just save my brother. You stepped into a war that's been burning for years. Her voice trembled. Then take me out of it. I can't, he said quietly. You're too deep now. They saw you. They know you matter to me. The words hit her like a shock. Matter to you? His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. Yes. Silence filled the room. The machines beeped softly beside them. Finally, Ilara whispered, You don't even know me, Dante. He took a slow breath. I know that you didn't run when everyone else would have. I know you looked at me, at what I am, and didn't flinch. That's more than most. Her throat ached. Maybe I should have. He smiled faintly, though there was no joy in it. Maybe. But you didn't. And now, you're the only thing I can't control. Ilara looked at him, the powerful man whose world revolved around obedience, whose calm could turn lethal in a blink, and saw, for the first time, fear. Not of others, but of losing something he didn't know how to keep. You can't protect everyone, she said softly. I can protect you, he said. That's enough. Before she could respond, one of his men appeared at the door. We found a name, he said. The one who ordered this. Marco De Luca. Ilara's heart sank. The man from the gala? Dante nodded slowly. I warned him. Dante, she began, but the look in his eyes stopped her cold. It wasn't anger. It was finality. He turned to his men. Get the car. Wait, she said, grabbing his arm. You can't just kill him. He looked down at her hand, then up at her face. You think I'll let him walk after he tried to kill my brother? After he came near you? There's another way, she said desperately. There isn't, he said, voice low and steady. Not in my world. He stepped closer, his breath warm against her ear. Go home, Ilara. I'll come for you when it's done. She shook her head. Don't do this. But he was already gone, a shadow disappearing into the night, leaving her standing beside the steady beeping of his brother's heart monitor. She sank into the nearest chair, trembling. The hospital lights flickered overhead, harsh and unkind. For the first time since she met him, she felt the full weight of what he was capable of and the terrifying truth that she still didn't want to lose him. She touched her locket, whispering to the empty room, Please, Dante. Don't burn everything just to save me. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, faint, far away. But in her heart, Ilara knew one thing for certain. Whatever was coming next, there would be no turning back. The night after the hospital incident was long and silent. Ilara lay awake in her new apartment, the one Dante had chosen for her, listening to every sound. Every creak felt like a warning, every gust of wind a whisper from the past. She hadn't seen Dante since he'd left to confront De Luca. She didn't know if he was alive, angry, or gone. She told herself she shouldn't care. But she did. When dawn came, the city outside was grey and damp with mist. Ilara brewed coffee just to have something to do, but her hands trembled as she lifted the cup. That's when she saw it. A white envelope had been slipped under her door sometime in the night. No address. No stamp. Just her name written in uneven letters. Her stomach tightened. She crouched and picked it up carefully. Inside was a single photograph, her mother's picture, the one she kept on her bedside table. Except this one was torn down the middle. Her breath caught. There was writing on the back, jagged and rushed. "You're next." The mug slipped from her hand and shattered. Within seconds she was grabbing her phone, dialing the only number that made sense. It rang once. "Where are you?" Dante's voice came through, low, sharp, alert. Her words tumbled out. "Someone was here. They broke in again. They took a photo of my mother and left a note." Silence for a heartbeat. Then, "Stay where you are. I don't want." I said stay. He hung up. The next sound she heard was tires screeching outside. Less than 10 minutes later, the front door swung open and Dante strode in with 2 of his men. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, eyes darker, jaw set tight. He scanned the room in seconds. "Show me." She handed him the photo and the note with shaking hands. He studied them silently. Then he turned to one of his men. "Check the building. Every floor, every exit. I want cameras, eyes, everything." "Yes, sir." The men moved instantly. Ilara stood frozen, watching him. "You think it's DeLuca?" He didn't answer immediately. "It could be. Or someone who wants to finish what he started." "Is he?" she began, meaning DeLuca. Dante's expression didn't change. "DeLuca won't hurt anyone again." Something in his voice made her stop asking questions. He finally looked at her. "You're moving again." "No," she said, more forcefully than she intended. "I'm not running anymore." His eyes softened slightly, but only for a second. "You're not running. You're surviving. I can't live like this, locked away, waiting for something else to happen." "Would you rather die on principle?" he said quietly. "Because I've buried people who thought bravery meant standing still." Her throat closed. "You can't decide everything for me." "I can," he said simply. "Because right now, every threat against me is a threat against you." He stepped closer, his voice low. "They know I care. That makes you a target." Ilara's chest tightened. "Then stop caring," she whispered. For a second, he didn't move. Then he reached up, brushed a stray hair from her face, his touch unexpectedly gentle. Too late. Before she could speak, his phone buzzed. He read the message, his jaw tightening. "We found the entry point. Rear fire escape. They used your window." She felt her stomach drop. Dante turned to his men. "Get her things. We leave in 5 minutes." Ilara tried to protest again, but the exhaustion in his face silenced her. Whatever he'd been through since that night at the hospital had hardened something in him, a quiet fury that frightened her more than the threats. Within an hour, they were in his car, driving out of the city. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To a place no one knows exists," he said. "You'll be safe there until I clean this up." She wanted to ask what cleanup meant, but she already knew. The rest of the drive passed in silence, the hum of the engine filling the space between them. After nearly 2 hours, they turned down a dirt road leading to a secluded villa surrounded by forest. It was beautiful, quiet, distant, and completely alone. Dante stopped the car and turned to her. "You'll stay here. My people will guard the perimeter." She stared at him. "And you?" "I have business in the city." "Business," she repeated softly. "That word means something very different for you." He smiled faintly. "It means fixing what other people break." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small silver key. "For the safe room," he said. "If anything happens, you lock yourself in and don't open the door for anyone but me." She took it reluctantly. "How do I know you'll come back?" His gaze lingered on her face. "Because I always finish what I start." And then he was gone, a shadow vanishing into the roar of an engine, leaving her surrounded by silence and the weight of too many questions. That night, as rain began to fall, Ilara sat by the window of the villa and whispered to the darkness, "You said I was safe. Prove it." The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows, golden and quiet. For the first time in weeks, there was no sound of the city, no shouting, no sirens, only birds and the wind through the trees. Ilara almost let herself believe she was safe. But then she noticed the guards outside, men in dark jackets walking the perimeter, radios crackling quietly. It wasn't a home. It was a cage dressed up as a sanctuary. She spent the morning wandering the villa. Every room looked like something from a magazine, glass walls, marble floors, quiet luxury. But everything felt untouched, lifeless. When she opened the study, she stopped. It was full of papers, maps, ledgers, photographs pinned to a board. Names and dates connected by lines. A network of Dante's world laid bare. One photo drew her eye, the night she'd saved his brother. The image was grainy, but unmistakable, her standing in the alley, shouting at the attackers. Her throat tightened. He'd been watching her since that night. Curiosity doesn't always keep you safe, Ilara. She jumped. Dante stood in the doorway, his coat damp from the rain. His tone wasn't angry, but it wasn't gentle either. "You're back," she said, ignoring the heat in her cheeks. "You should have warned me this room was off limits." "I shouldn't have to," he replied. "You're smart enough to know I don't leave my life lying around for strangers to study." "I'm not a stranger anymore," she said. That made him pause. "No," he admitted. "You're not." He walked past her, removing his jacket. "You shouldn't have come in here," he repeated more quietly. "But since you have, tell me what you see." She looked back at the board. "I see people. Secrets. Wars you keep fighting. And I see why you never sleep," she said softly. "Because every line on that wall means another life you have to control." He didn't respond for a moment. Then he said, "Control keeps people alive." "Does it?" she asked. "Or does it just keep you from feeling helpless?" His eyes flickered, something unreadable passing through them. "You think you know me that well?" "No," she said. "But I think I know what loneliness looks like." He looked away, as if her words hit somewhere deeper than he wanted. "You shouldn't look for meaning where there isn't any. Then stop giving everything you touch so much meaning," she said quietly. The air between them went still. He turned, closing the distance between them until she could feel the warmth of his presence. "You talk like someone who isn't afraid of me." "Maybe I'm too tired to be," she said. He smiled faintly. Dangerous answer. Truthful one. They stood there for a moment, neither moving. The rain outside softened, the sound steady and rhythmic. Finally, Dante stepped back. "You're staying here until I find who's behind the threats. And if you don't?" "I will," he said simply. "But there's something you should know before that happens." He walked to the desk, pulled out a drawer, and took out a worn photograph, two young boys standing beside a woman with the same dark eyes as his. "My family," he said quietly. "The one I lost before I built this empire. My father was murdered by men who thought power meant taking everything they wanted. I swore it would never happen again." Ilara looked at the photo, then at him. "That's why you built this." "That's why I became this," he corrected. "Power is the only language the world listens to." She hesitated. "And what happens when you have all of it?" He met her gaze. "You start looking for someone who reminds you why you wanted it in the first place." Her heart pounded. "And that's me." He didn't answer right away. "You make me remember what mercy feels like. And that terrifies me." Silence filled the room again, heavy and strange. Ilara finally said, "Then maybe you're not as lost as you think." Dante gave a small, tired smile. "You shouldn't say things like that, little bird. It makes me want to believe you." He walked to the window, looking out at the forest. "My world isn't one you walk out of, Ilara. Once you're in, there are only two endings: control it, or be destroyed by it." She crossed her arms. "Then maybe it's time someone changed the rules." He turned, watching her. For the first time, there was something like admiration in his expression, soft, careful. "Careful," he said quietly. "You sound like you're ready to challenge me." "Maybe I am," she said. He chuckled under his breath. "Then perhaps the world really has no idea what it's up against." Outside, thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. Inside, they stood in the same room, two people from opposite worlds, drawn together by the same fire neither could put out. And somewhere deep down, Elara knew the truth. This wasn't just protection anymore. It was the beginning of something that could save them both or destroy them completely. Days passed in uneasy quiet. The villa's walls, once a comfort, began to feel too still, like they were holding their breath. Elara tried to distract herself by helping the staff, walking the gardens, pretending life was normal. But even the silence felt watched. She hadn't seen much of Dante since that morning in the study. He came and went at odd hours, his movements precise, controlled, unreadable. When he was home, he spent most of his time in his office, behind closed doors, speaking in low tones to men who never smiled. Elara told herself it wasn't her business. But curiosity had always been her curse. One afternoon, as rain tapped softly against the windows, she brought him a tray of coffee, a small peace offering for the argument they'd had 2 nights before. She knocked once, then twice. No answer. She pushed the door open quietly. Inside, Dante sat at his desk, his head bowed over a document. His jacket hung on the back of the chair, his sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, older somehow. "Coffee," she said softly, setting the tray down. He didn't look up. "You should knock louder." "I did," she said, smiling faintly. Finally, he raised his gaze. "You shouldn't be here." "Then you shouldn't leave your door unlocked," she replied. "It's confusing." A ghost of a smile flickered across his face before fading. "You're braver than most people I know. I think that's your way of saying I'm stubborn." "Same thing," he said quietly. She hesitated, then asked, "Any progress?" He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Some. But every answer brings 2 more problems." He gestured to the papers. "The men who attacked my brother didn't act alone. There's someone feeding them information, someone inside my circle." Elara frowned. "Someone close to you?" "Yes." His eyes darkened. "Too close." She crossed her arms. "So you're surrounded by people you can't trust. That sounds exhausting." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "It is. That's why I don't sleep." She wanted to ask more, but something in his tone warned her to stop. She turned to leave, then paused. "Dante, if you find out who betrayed you, what will you do?" His answer was immediate. "What I always do." There was no hesitation, no remorse, just the cold certainty of a man who had lived too long by his own code. That night, she couldn't sleep. The storm outside matched the chaos in her thoughts. Every flash of lightning illuminated the shadows in her room, every rumble of thunder reminded her of the sound of his voice, low, dangerous, but always steady. When she finally drifted into uneasy rest, she dreamed of the alley again, only this time, when she shouted for the men to stop, the face that turned toward her wasn't the attacker's. It was Dante's. The next morning, she found one of the villa guards waiting outside her door. "Mr. Vasari would like to see you." In the main hall, Dante stood by the fireplace, papers scattered across the table. "You were right," he said when she entered. She blinked. "About what?" "Someone close betrayed me. We confirmed it last night." Her stomach dropped. "Who?" He handed her a photograph. She recognized the man instantly, the one who had driven her home after that first night, who had delivered her locket and the invitations. "Paolo," she whispered. "He worked for you." "Worked," Dante corrected. Past tense. Elara stared at him, understanding dawning slowly. "What did you do?" "What I had to," he said, his tone quiet but absolute. "You killed him," she said, the words catching in her throat. He didn't deny it. "Why?" she demanded. "He could have told you things." "He already did." Her pulse quickened. "What did he say?" Dante looked at her, his eyes unreadable. "He said my brother wasn't the target that night." She froze. "Then who was?" The silence that followed was unbearable. Dante's gaze didn't waver. "Me." Elara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "You mean those men? They were trying to kill you?" "Yes." "And your brother was the one who set it up?" She stared at him in disbelief. "That's not possible. You said he was innocent." "I wanted to believe that," Dante said. "But the truth doesn't care what I want." Her mind raced. "But why would your brother?" "Because power changes people. Dante interrupted softly. Because he thought he could take everything I built. Ilara sank into a chair, her heart pounding. So all this time, you were protecting the man who betrayed you. He nodded once. Ironic, isn't it? She looked up at him. And now? He looked out the window, where the storm had finally stopped. Now, I decide what kind of man I'm going to be when I face him. That night, the villa was quiet again. Ilara found herself wandering the halls, drawn by the faint sound of music coming from the study. Dante sat alone, a glass of whiskey in hand, a record spinning softly in the background. You shouldn't drink that much, she said quietly. He glanced up, surprised. I didn't think you'd still be awake. Neither did I, she said. I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see that alley. He nodded slowly. That's the thing about violence. Once you see it, it never leaves you. She hesitated. What will you do about your brother? He took a slow sip before answering. What I should have done the moment he turned on me. You mean kill him? He didn't respond. She walked closer, her voice trembling. Don't. You've already lost too much. Don't lose yourself, too. He looked at her then, something raw flickering in his eyes. You think I haven't already? She didn't know what to say. She sat beside him instead, the silence between them heavy with everything neither could fix. The next morning dawned grey and heavy. Dante was gone when Ilara woke, but his absence pressed against her like a shadow. The guards moved differently that day, quicker, tenser. Something was happening. By afternoon, the villa was nearly empty. The men who remained whispered to each other in low tones. Ilara approached one of them. Where's Mr. Vasari? The man hesitated, then said, He's gone to settle things. Settle, she repeated. He didn't answer. A cold dread filled her chest. She didn't need to ask what settle meant. She already knew. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and ran outside. The guard called after her, but she ignored him, her heart pounding as she ran toward the car Dante had left for her. It took her nearly an hour to find him, an abandoned warehouse near the docks, surrounded by black SUVs. She crept closer, ducking behind a stack of crates. Through the open door, she saw him standing face to face with a man who looked weak, pale, broken. Luca. Dante's gun hung loosely at his side. His expression was calm, but his eyes burned. You had everything, he said. My protection. My loyalty. And you still sold me out. Luca coughed weakly. You took everything first. You made me your shadow. You made yourself that, Dante said quietly. You could have built with me. I wanted my own name, Luca rasped. Not yours. Not Vasari. Ilara's throat tightened. She wanted to call out, to stop this, but her body wouldn't move. Dante raised the gun. You could have had peace. Luca laughed bitterly. There's no peace in your world, brother. The sound of the gunshot cracked the air like lightning. Ilara gasped, clapping her hands over her mouth. Dante stood frozen for a moment, staring at what he'd done, then turned away. When he finally saw her standing there, his expression didn't change, only his eyes did, a flicker of something between pain and surrender. You shouldn't have come, he said quietly. Her voice shook. You killed him. He was already gone, Dante said, his tone soft but unflinching. This was mercy. She stepped closer, tears stinging her eyes. You think mercy looks like this? He didn't respond. He simply looked at her, and for the first time, she saw him not as the cold, powerful man the world feared, but as someone stripped bare, a man who had lost everything, including the last piece of himself. She whispered, You said I made you remember what mercy feels like. And you did, he said. But mercy doesn't survive in my world, Ilara. It never does. He took a slow step toward her. You shouldn't have followed me here. You don't belong in this place. Her voice broke. Then stop dragging me into it. I tried, he said. From the moment I met you, I tried. She shook her head, tears spilling freely now. You keep saying you're protecting me, but all you're doing is destroying everything you touch. He froze at that. Then, quietly, You're right. She turned to leave, but his hand caught hers, desperate this time, almost human. Ilara, he said softly. If I lose you too. She looked back, her heart breaking at the sight of him, the man everyone feared brought to his knees by something as simple as regret. Then maybe it's time you learned what loss feels like, she whispered, pulling her hand free. She walked away, the echo of her footsteps mingling with the sound of rain beginning to fall again outside. Behind her, Dante stood alone beside his brother's body, the gun heavy in his hand, the weight of everything he'd built finally crushing him. For the first time in years, he let himself feel it, not rage, not power, but grief. And in that grief, he realized what he'd truly lost. Not his brother. The days after Luca's death were quiet, too quiet. Dante returned to the villa with his usual composure, his voice calm, his movements measured, his suit pressed as if nothing had happened. But something in him had shifted. The stillness around him was different now, colder. Ilara barely spoke to him. She stayed in her room, avoiding the long hallways that smelled faintly of rain and smoke. Every time she passed the study, she heard his voice behind the door, not shouting, not commanding, just talking in that low tone that didn't sound like a man giving orders, but a man talking to ghosts. He was unraveling, only quietly. One night, she woke to the sound of a piano. Soft notes drifting through the house, fragile and slow. It was a melody she didn't recognize, but it carried something heavy, regret, maybe. She followed the sound until she found him in the darkened hall, sitting before a grand piano she hadn't noticed before. A single lamp glowed beside him. Couldn't sleep? She asked softly. He didn't look up. You should be asleep. You're safer that way. Safer, she said. From what? From me. Ilara stood a few steps away. You're not a monster, Dante. His fingers froze over the keys. Monsters don't think they're monsters, Ilara. That's what makes them dangerous. You're not dangerous to me. He gave a faint, humorless smile. That's what I thought about my brother. Silence. The only sound was the faint echo of rain against the window. She took a slow breath. You did what you thought was right. I did what I always do, he said quietly. I solved the problem. She hesitated, then walked closer. You can't fix everything with violence. It's like trying to heal a wound by reopening it. He finally turned to look at her. His eyes were tired, darker than she'd ever seen them. You think I don't know that? She didn't answer. He leaned back, looking away again. You keep trying to save people who can't be saved. That's going to get you hurt someday. Maybe, she said softly. But that's who I am. Dante studied her for a long time. And that's why I can't let you stay. Her breath caught. What do you mean? He stood, walking toward the window. There's a plane leaving tonight. It'll take you somewhere safe. A place where no one knows you. I've already arranged everything. Ilara's chest tightened. You're sending me away? Yes. Because I saw what you did. Because you shouldn't have to live with what I am, he said. You deserve peace, not this. She shook her head. You think peace is just distance. It's not that simple. It is, he said quietly. If you stop fighting it. She took a step closer, her voice trembling. You're running from me. I'm protecting you, he said firmly. No, she whispered. You're protecting yourself from feeling guilty. That made him flinch, just slightly. But she saw it. He turned toward her, his face unreadable. You think you know me? I think I've seen enough to know you don't hate what you've done as much as you hate what it's turned you into. He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, you should pack your things. She stared at him. If I go, that's it. Yes. Then say it, she said, her voice breaking. Say you don't want me here. He didn't answer. Say it, she shouted. Dante's jaw tightened. Go upstairs, Ilara. Tears burned her eyes. Coward. For the first time, she saw him falter, his composure cracking for just a second. His voice dropped low, rougher than she'd ever heard it. If I say I want you to stay, I won't let you go, he said. And if I don't let you go, you'll die in my world. That's not love. That's possession. The words broke her. She turned away, whispering, then maybe I never meant anything at all. He didn't try to stop her when she walked out of the room. The melody she'd interrupted lingered in the air, unfinished, unresolved, like everything between them. Ilara didn't sleep that night. She sat by her window, watching the rain turn to mist, listening to the faint sounds of movement downstairs, Dante's men preparing for her departure. She thought of the alley, the hospital, the gala, the villa, every strange moment that had led her here. Saving a stranger had rewritten her life, and now the story was ending where it began, with her leaving and him staying in the dark. At dawn, there was a knock at her door. "Miss Mendez," one of the guards said. "Mr. Vasari asked me to take you to the plane." Ilara picked up her bag and followed silently through the long marble halls. Dante wasn't there to say goodbye. She wasn't surprised. The car ride to the private airstrip was quiet. Grey light spread slowly over the horizon, the world washed pale and colorless. When they reached the tarmac, the guard stopped beside the sleek black plane and opened the door for her. "You'll be met by someone on the other side," he said. She nodded numbly. But as she climbed the steps, she saw him standing near the hangar, half hidden by shadow. Dante. He hadn't come to the car, but he couldn't stay away either. Ilara froze. For a long moment, they just looked at each other across the distance, two people who'd shared something neither could name, something too dangerous to hold on to. Finally, she walked down the steps toward him. The guard hesitated but didn't stop her. When she reached him, the wind whipped her hair around her face. "You weren't going to say goodbye?" she asked. "I was," he said. From a distance. "That's not goodbye." He gave a faint, tired smile. "It's safer." "For who?" "For both of us." Ilara stared at him, her voice breaking. "Do you really believe that?" He looked away, the wind tugging at his coat. "If I believed otherwise, I wouldn't let you go." She took a step closer. "Then don't." His jaw clenched. "Ilara." "No," she said. "Don't tell me it's for my safety. Don't tell me it's to protect me. You don't get to make that choice for me." He was silent. "You once said I made you remember what mercy feels like," she whispered. "If that's true, don't throw me away." He met her gaze then, and for a heartbeat, the world felt still. No guards, no enemies, no threats, just them. "I'm not throwing you away," he said softly. "I'm saving the only good thing left in me." A tear slipped down her cheek. "You don't get to decide what I survive." He stepped closer, his voice low and raw. "You don't understand what it means to be near me. The people I've buried, the ones I couldn't protect. I'm still here," she said fiercely. "I've seen what you are, and I'm still here." His breath hitched, a sound she'd never heard from him before. "Ilara," he reached up, brushing the tear from her cheek with the back of his hand. "You make me want things I can't afford to want." "Then maybe you should start wanting them anyway," she whispered. He looked at her for a long moment, the storm in his eyes softening just enough for light to break through. Then he did something she didn't expect. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers, his voice barely audible. "If I let you stay, I'll never let you leave again," he said. "And I can't promise my world won't destroy you." She closed her eyes. "Maybe it'll destroy both of us. But at least we'll stop pretending." For a moment, neither moved. The wind roared around them, carrying the faint sound of engines starting. Then, finally, Dante stepped back. "Go," he said quietly. Ilara shook her head. "Not like this." "Go," he repeated, but this time his voice broke on the word. She stared at him one last time, memorizing every line of his face, the strength, the sorrow, the contradictions that made him who he was. Then she turned and walked toward the plane. At the door, she looked back once more. He was still standing there, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on her. She wanted to believe he'd come after her, that he'd change his mind. But as the door closed and the engines roared to life, she realized something else. Maybe love wasn't always about staying. Maybe sometimes it was about letting the other person survive without you. As the plane lifted off, she looked down through the window. Dante was still there, a dark figure against the silver morning. She pressed her hand against the glass. "Goodbye, Dante." Far below, unseen by her, Dante whispered to the wind, "You'll come back. You always will." That night, after she was gone, Dante returned to the empty villa. The piano sat untouched, the silence heavier than before. He walked into the study, pulled a folded letter from his pocket, and placed it on the desk. It was hers. He hadn't read it, couldn't. Instead, he poured himself a drink and looked out at the rain beginning again. In the quiet, he murmured, "You saved me once, Ilara. Maybe someday, I'll save myself enough to deserve it." The rain fell harder. The city outside slept, unaware that its most dangerous man was standing in his cage of marble and glass unarmed, unguarded, and, for the first time, utterly alone. Weeks passed. The sky over the small coastal town where Ilara now lived was pale and endless, painted in soft blues and salt-grey mornings. The air smelled of the sea instead of smoke and blood. The rhythm of her days had become simple again, waking to sunlight instead of alarms, hearing laughter instead of whispers. She worked quietly at the local clinic, tending to fishermen with bruised hands and mothers with tired eyes. No guards. No luxury. Just people. Just life. But every night, when she sat by the window overlooking the ocean, she thought of him. Dante Vasari. The man she'd saved by accident and who, in return, had almost destroyed her peace completely. Some nights she told herself she hated him for the fear, the control, the violence he carried like a second skin. Other nights, she missed him with an ache that made her eyes sting. Because beneath the darkness, he had looked at her like she was something he didn't believe the world could still hold, something pure. And that look had changed everything. She had left to survive, but she hadn't stopped caring. One evening, as she was closing the clinic, she noticed an envelope slipped under the door. Her hands trembled when she saw the handwriting. Dante's. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single piece of paper. "I've done what I should have done long ago. It's over. You're safe now. Don't come back. Live the life I took from you. That's all the apology I have left." Her knees nearly gave out. She gripped the counter, reading it again, her pulse quickening. He was alive, but the words felt like a farewell. Over. What did that mean? The next morning, she couldn't focus. Every patient's voice blurred into background noise. By afternoon, she found herself standing at the train station with her bag packed before she even realized what she was doing. When the train pulled away, carrying her back toward the city she swore she'd left behind, she told herself she wasn't going to him just for answers. Just to see if he was still human after all the things he'd done. But the truth, deep down, was simpler. She was going because her heart wouldn't let her stay away. The city hadn't changed. It still pulsed with chaos, with life, with danger. But the mansion, Dante's fortress of marble and silence, looked different now. The guards were gone. The gates stood open. Ilara hesitated at the front door, then stepped inside. The air was colder, emptier. Dust gathered on the piano keys. "Dante," she called softly. No answer. She walked through the halls until she reached his study. The door was open. Inside, a single envelope sat on the desk beside an old photograph, the one of him and his brother as children. Her heart tightened as she picked it up. The note was short. "If you're reading this, it means you didn't listen. You always had to see for yourself. I've gone to finish it. Don't follow me this time. Please." She exhaled shakily. But she was already moving. Because Ilara Mendez never listened when someone told her not to save someone. She called every contact she still had, the driver, the housekeeper, the doctor who had once treated Luca. Piece by piece, she pieced it together. Dante had gone to the outskirts of the city, to the docks where his family's empire had begun and where, she realized, he meant to end it. By the time she got there, the sun had already dipped below the horizon. The docks were silent, lit only by the glow of distant streetlights. And then she saw him. Standing at the edge of the pier, coat fluttering in the wind, looking out at the dark water. Alone. She walked toward him, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "So this is where you disappear." He didn't turn. "I told you not to come. I've never been good at doing what I'm told." A faint smile ghosted across his face. "That's one of the things I'll miss most about you." She stopped a few steps behind him. "What did you mean in your note?" "That it's over." He finally turned, and she saw it, the exhaustion, the quiet acceptance. Every name on that wall in my study, they're gone. Every enemy. Every threat. I made sure of it. Her voice trembled. You mean you? Yes, he said simply. And in doing it, I erased myself too. She shook her head. You can't erase yourself from your own story. I already have, he said. I've signed everything away. The accounts, the houses. It's all gone. There's nothing left of Dante Vasari but what you remember. Why? She whispered. He looked past her, his gaze distant. Because I've learned something from you. The only thing harder than killing is living with what you've killed. And I can't do it anymore. Ilara felt tears sting her eyes. So what? You're going to walk away and vanish? He gave a small shrug. That's the idea. She stepped closer, angry now. You think disappearing makes you noble? You think it fixes anything? It keeps you safe, he said quietly. I'm not the one who needs saving anymore, she said, her voice breaking. You are. For the first time, he looked at her, really looked, and she saw it, the faint flicker of the man she had once glimpsed beneath the violence. Why can't you hate me? He asked softly. Because I saw you before you became this, she said. And because I still see that person, even when you don't. He turned away, swallowing hard. Then you see something that isn't there anymore. Maybe, she whispered. Or maybe you're just too afraid to believe someone still could. The wind whipped between them, carrying the sound of waves crashing against the pier. Dante reached into his coat and pulled out the small locket she'd once lost, the one he had returned to her months ago. I kept this, he said. I don't know why. Because it reminded you of who you were, she said. He hesitated, then pressed it into her hand. Now it's yours again. She stared at it, small, simple, still warm from his touch. And what will you have? He gave her a faint smile. Peace, maybe. Or nothing. Sometimes they're the same thing. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. Don't do this, Dante. You don't get to disappear and call it redemption. He looked down at her. Then tell me what I should call it. She took a deep breath. A beginning. He laughed softly, shaking his head. You still think I can be saved? I don't think you can be, she said. I know you already were, the night I pulled you out of that alley. Everything after that was you trying to undo it. He stared at her for a long moment, then looked away. You really are impossible. I know, she said quietly. And that's why I'm not leaving. The wind off the water grew colder as the night deepened. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. Ilara and Dante stood in silence, the city lights flickering faintly behind them. You don't have to run anymore, she said finally. You've already paid for everything you've done. You don't understand, he said. Men like me don't get to start over. We don't get forgiveness. Then stop being men like you, she said softly. Start being someone else. Dante gave a tired smile. And who would that be? The man who played piano at midnight, she said. The one who remembered mercy. He closed his eyes. You make it sound simple. It's not, she said. But nothing worth saving ever is. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said quietly, if I try, if I walk away from all of it, what happens when the past comes back? Then we face it together. He turned toward her, his expression unreadable. You'd do that? Yes, she said without hesitation. Because if I could face the man everyone called a monster and still see the person beneath, I can face anything. Something in him broke then, not visibly, not dramatically, but in the quiet way that meant the truth had finally reached him. He took a slow step forward, then another, until he stood close enough for her to feel the warmth of him. His voice was low, rough. You make me want to believe again. Then believe, she whispered. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind and the soft crash of the sea. Then, finally, he reached out and pulled her close, not with hunger or desperation, but with the quiet certainty of a man who had run out of reasons to keep pretending he didn't care. They stood like that for what felt like forever, two broken pieces fitting together in the middle of everything they couldn't undo. When he finally spoke again, his voice trembled slightly. You should know. I don't know how to live without the fight. Then learn, she said softly. Start small. Breathe. Live. That's how everyone starts. He exhaled slowly, almost a laugh. You really think it's that easy? No, she said, meeting his eyes. But you've done harder things. A faint smile touched his lips, the first true one she'd seen in months. Then the sound of engines broke the quiet. 2 cars approached from the far end of the docks, headlights cutting through the mist. Dante stiffened instantly. They followed you, he said. No, she said quickly. I came alone. The cars stopped 20 yards away. Men stepped out, suits, guns, shadows. The last ghosts of the empire he'd tried to end. Dante's hand went to his side, but Ilara caught it. No, she said. Don't. He looked at her. If I don't, you'll die. Then so will you, she said. And everything you just said will mean nothing. He hesitated, eyes darting between her and the men. Then, for the first time, he dropped the gun. It hit the dock with a dull thud. He straightened, shoulders squared. You came for a dead man, he called to them. But I'm done being him. The men looked at each other, uncertain. The silence stretched, then one by one, they stepped back, lowering their weapons. No orders. No threats. Just understanding. Dante exhaled slowly. It's over, he whispered. Ilara reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. Then let's leave before it isn't. He looked at her, a small, incredulous smile breaking through. You're serious? Yes. He nodded once. Then lead the way, little bird. They walked together toward the city lights, the sea wind at their backs, the weight of the past finally lifting. Weeks later, in a small town by the coast, the piano played again. Not in a mansion, not in the dark, but in a small cottage overlooking the water. Ilara sat by the window, reading. Dante played quietly, his touch careful, uncertain, learning softness again. When he finished, she looked up and smiled. That one sounds new. It is, he said. Wrote it last night. What's it called? He hesitated, then smiled faintly. Redemption. Ilara walked to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. You finally believe in it. He looked up at her, eyes soft, calm. I do now. Outside, the sea whispered against the shore. Inside, 2 people who had once been broken found something close to peace, not perfect, not unscarred, but real. The story that began with a stranger in an alley ended not with power, not with revenge, but with something far rarer. A second chance. And this time, neither of them turned away. Their story may have ended, but what if it didn't? What if Dante's past wasn't done with him yet? Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story will make you question everything you thought was over. And if you loved this journey, drop a red heart hash in the comments to bring their world back for one more chapter.